Hey gang, Seth Apter here. I'm here with a tip about stamping. If you know me, you know I love to work in layers, but I'm always trying to find new ways to create the layers, and one of the ways I like to create layers for my abstract work is by using stamps. I don't mean the kind of stamps where there's a perfect word or a perfect face. I mean kind of a messy, abstract, grungy layer. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. First I want to talk a little bit about ink pads, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the stamps you're going to use. You can see I have a grouping of ink pads here. They're Stays-On. I like this brand for this technique for a few reasons. The ink dries fast. I don't have to worry about any of the layers being wet when I move to the next layer. And because the ink dries, that means that I can go over this layer with a wet medium, and I don't get any problem with that. Sometimes when you use certain inks that are water reactive, say dye ink, for example, it's meant to be affected by water. So what happens is if you paint over this layer we're going to make, you just end up making a mess. So Stays-On is a good example of the ink that I would recommend for this. In terms of the stamps, you see we have a slew of red rubber stamps here. I personally prefer red rubber to the clear stamps. I think they make a better impression for mixed media. But you also might notice that these are cling and not mounted. You can get rubber stamps mounted on wood, or you can get them cling like these. Cling has a little bit of a sticky back, and normally what you do is you put it on an acrylic block so you get a good impression. I don't want to make a good impression here though, I want to make a little bit of a mess. So I'm leaving it off so I can bend the stamps and I can roll the stamps and I can get a very individual design. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose one of the colors of my ink pads and I'm going to press it into my stamp to get the ink on. And then I'm going to go ahead and really quite randomly, I'm going to press the stamp into the background. I am not going for perfection here. Actually, I'm going for the opposite. What I really want is a loose background, one that I obtain almost without even trying. If you really want to test yourself, you can do it without even looking. You'll probably like it the best. You'll notice that some of the stamps I'm using, like this one, has larger gaps between the designs, so you're going to get a relatively speaking, a larger design. And some of the other ones, like the first stamps that I used, they're very tight together, so that you get much greater coverage. For an abstract background like this, I really like to interweave both. That way you get an interesting look, and at the same time, you get some variety. If I happen to have one like this that's extremely linear, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of that to create a little bit of a border or edge around my piece. And again, I'm not trying very hard to get these even. I'm not even trying very hard to use the whole stamp. I just want this idea of a designed background. You might notice that if I use a stamp with one color, then immediately after, I might go in and use the same stamp with a different color. What happens when you overlap those stamps is that you create some depth that you just cannot get otherwise. In the end, what I've done is I've used the ink and I've used the stamp to really fill up this whole layer here, and it's just the beginning of what my piece will be. Probably knowing me, the next layer I'll do is a layer of translucent paint. That way you won't lose the stamping, but you'll gain depth and dimension. Thank you for taking the time to watch this tip.